Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. Welcome to the .NET Show. Today I'm talking to James Montemagno from Microsoft to get some guidance on Xamarin.Forms and MAUI. Is Xamarin dead? Should we ignore it? Will we have trouble converting Xamarin.Forms projects to MAUI projects in November? The answer to these questions and more are coming right up on the .NET Show. Welcome to the very first .NET Show. My name is Carl Franklin. I know I don't look like myself, but this is me. It's Carl. And James Montemagno is here. Hi, James.
Hey, Carl. How are you?
Great. There's a reason why I had you on this show, and of course, that's Xamarin. And you have been my Xamarin partner on the road way back in those early days. We did the .NET Rocks tour, and I've been doing Xamarin.Forms ever since. And you have just done some amazing things with Xamarin.Forms, but I wanted to disambiguate between, what Xamarin.Forms is today and what it's evolving into. And right off the bat, I want to answer the question that people are asking: should I spend time right now doing Xamarin.Forms? Okay, I may learn something. Is that going to apply to MAUI when MAUI comes out in November? And B, is my code going to be able to move over to be a MAUI application? And how confident are we that that is going to happen?
Yeah, totally. Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. I'm super excited, as always, to talk about anything mobile and .NET and C# related in my entire life.
Right.
And I've been doing it now. We just had our 5-year anniversary at Microsoft, which is really quite amazing for all the Xamarin folks. And 8.5 years for me between Xamarin and Microsoft, and 10 years doing just Xamarin all up for my day-to-day living. And I still continue, even though I'm a program manager for .NET community with an amazing team of individuals. Kind of like you said, it's in the very beginning, before I answer your questions, is, how did we get here, right? And it's because we have this vibrant, beautiful community of people that are out there building awesome things. They're tweeting about stuff. They're building samples. They're contributing to Xamarin.Forms, to Xamarin Essentials. They're contributing to .NET MAUI now. They're contributing to all of .NET.
Yeah. And
they're also out there publishing their own samples, their own libraries, and sort of organically growing this. And that's the reason that I joined Xamarin over 8 years ago, is because I really fell in love with the amazing community of people in and around Xamarin and .NET. And I wanted to show more people that if you were a C# and .NET developer, that you could build iOS and Android applications in the tools that you already know and love. So if you're a web developer, you can go and do that, right?
Yeah.
And now, being part of Microsoft for the last 5 years, there's been a lot of changes. I mean, Xamarin.Forms itself just turned 6 or 7 years old at this point, but there has been, more than anything, a combination of forces between the Xamarin team, the Visual Studio team, the .NET team, the runtime team, the language teams, the NuGet teams. So really, when we took a look at .NET 5 as the starting of the convergence of what it means for .NET developers, it means like, hey, it's just this one thing, .NET. And this .NET thing is going to be great everywhere.
Right.
And with .NET 6, which is when .NET MAUI will launch, it's, to me, the most exciting time, because there's amazing work happening in the web stack world with Blazor and ASP.NET Core. There's amazing things happening in microservices. And of course, the next evolution of Xamarin.Forms with .NET MAUI. So before I answer your question, I'm just going to say, what the heck is .NET MAUI, right?
Right.
So Xamarin.Forms, right? Let's start with Xamarin.Forms. Xamarin.Forms took iOS and Android for .NET, which was like, hey, I can build an iOS UI and Android UI using Visual Studio and share a bunch of C# and .NET code.
Right.
It turned into, you had to do separate UIs. Now you have one single cross-platform UI framework that you can build for iOS, Android, and Windows. And it's always been really focused on mobile first and foremost in Xamarin.Forms world.
I also have to say that, and I have to add that that Xamarin, without Xamarin.Forms, you really had to know a lot about the platforms that you were writing on, right? The iOS platform. You had to almost go through the docs in iOS and figure what's going on in that world, and then again in Android. And it was great. Don't get me wrong, because you could do it in C#, but you still had to know a lot about those platforms.
Yeah. And what we've seen over the last year or two, at least from my perspective, and really it's the amazing work of the team. So between the entire engineering team with John Dick and Matthew Leibowitz and Jonathan Peppers and PMs with Maddie and David and, Jake, and it goes on, right? Pierce, like all these amazing people that have really contributed to it and really made it what it is that it sort of said, well, what do developers need in a cross-platform world? Like, what are attractive about other frameworks? And as we've seen Xamarin.Forms evolve, especially with Xamarin.Forms 5, which I think is the most amazing release of that framework yet, is it combined with other pieces of core technology that enables you to write less platform-specific code, less renderers, and also less native API access. So with Xamarin.Forms, I sort of start to see the evolution of .NET MAUI, which is when you file new a Xamarin.Forms project, you get Xamarin.Forms and you get Xamarin Essentials. And Xamarin Essentials was a project that I PM'd with Jonathan Dick and Matthew Leibowitz and a bunch of other amazing engineers that said, let's take those native APIs and let's turn them into cross-platform APIs to access that native functionality. And file new, you get cross-platform UI and cross-platform native features with still access if you want to dip down into those things if you need to. Right. And what we see next is what else do developers need? So .NET MAUI says Xamarin.Forms is at this pivotal point that it's many, many years old. There's a lot of architectural things that could be improved on it. And it's a great time to do that with .NET 5 and .NET 6 because there's a lot of advantages to moving to that runtime for developers. Consistent, you'll get every feature of C# right away. You get all the .NET features right away. So it's not separate. It's every single .NET product is going to ship all at the same time for developers. So there's not like, oh, this gets this feature, this gets this feature. Right. Yeah. But this thing will now be everything Xamarin.Forms is, but re-architected from the ground up for performance in a modern day mobile and desktop workloads. So it's not only going to target iOS, Android, but also Windows and Mac. So you get the 4 platforms to start with, and the team is really focused on trying to ensure that what they promise is what they deliver. You don't want to overpromise, say we're going to get this and this and this and that. And there's more platforms out there that are important, but you got to start somewhere. There's obviously customer needs, but .NET MAUI says, okay, well, let's look at this. We're going to build stuff from the ground up. So it's super duper fast. It's easy to extend. And by extend, I mean, not only contribute, but add custom controls. If you need to touch platform code, it's easier than ever. Like we're talking 1 or 2 lines of code to access underlying native feature type of stuff. Yeah. And it also says, let's add everything from Xamarin Essentials. You just get in there. It's all in there. Boom. It's all in there. It's all in there. It's all in there. Right. And then it says, let's look at all these other libraries that the team has sort of developed over the years. Let's put that all in there. So that means cross-platform images and SVGs. It's just included. You just have an images folder. You know what you do with an images folder? You put images in it.
Put images in it.
And it at compile time,
because currently
it does everything for you.
A little bit different, right? Currently you have to do images differently on each platform, and you would think that images. No, they're a resource in Android, and they're something else in iOS, and you have to follow this protocol and whatever. So I love the fact that you guys are not only taking Xamarin.Forms as the UI layer, but also the cross-platform layer. You're moving all that stuff up into that layer. And that's what I really love about it.
Yeah, I think of .NET MAUI more of a platform than a framework, right? Xamarin.Forms is a framework for building, native UIs, But .NET MAUI is a platform for building these cross-platform native applications. So you get the images, you get fonts, you get translations, you get app icons cross-platform, you get splash screens cross-platform. It's all in one project too. So everything is in one project. And that's from years upon years of everything that went into Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms and listening and learning from our developers. And I think it's a very sort of really elegant evolution of Xamarin.Forms for what developers are building in 2021 and 2022 going forward.
So you mentioned a re-architecturing, and the first thing that comes to mind is renderers. Renderers sort of go away and become a little more, I don't know, what would you say, object-oriented, a little more built into the framework kind of thing as a different architecture?
Yeah, so it's architectured in a way where it's decoupled. So what we found is that there's a lot of amazing libraries like Reactive UI, and James Clancy has his Comet project, and also people that have built custom UIs with Skia Sharp and self-drawing, and of course the Xamarin.Forms native controls. And the team thought about, how are you going to make it flexible for developers? So every single control is an interface, and to implement a single new control or even a renderer, they don't even really call them really renderers, but it's a handler now. They have handlers for every handler.
Right.
I think it's a better name. So to implement your own handler, it's like 1 or 2 lines of code compared to all these crazy lifecycle events and attachment and detachment, all these things. Everything is an interface that you might just need to spice up 1 or 2 things for your framework or your custom control library. And what the team talking with David and talking with John is, and everybody else is, what they really want is that you'll never really have to do that. But if you are the DevExpresses of the world, or you're the the Reactive UI of the world, or you're the Comet or the Fabulous project for F#, it'll be really easy and minimal code to extend the platform and to add new things to it. So what it does is, where before you would have a bunch of layers, there are no more layers. It's just an implementation of an interface that gets lit up on top of it.
And I also heard that there's going to be an attempt to allow you to run existing Xamarin.Forms controls in MAUI applications using some kind of shim. Is that right?
Yeah, so let's talk about that in your question, which was like the backwards compatibility part of it. Like, what if I start Xamarin.Forms today?
Right.
And the answer to that is like, yes, absolutely, because one, it's early previews for .NET MAUI of time of this recording, .NET 6 preview 2, preview 3 timeframe. Yeah. And the nice thing with .NET MAUI is that, since it's an evolution, is that all of your existing code should basically just come over. All of your existing XAML UI, still, top tier. All of your existing view models, all your code, everything like that should come over. Right. The biggest change will be the project system, where before we had multiple projects, we're going to a single project, SDK style. So that will need like a try convert tool that should try to migrate it for you or tell you how to migrate it easily enough. Yeah. But as far as all of your logic, all of that should come over. Now, there are going to be a few breaking changes in a few names of controls or properties, but very minimal. And what the team has also been doing is what you were saying, is they have this backwards compatibility shim. So, for example, if they remove a controller, they rename a controller, you've created a custom control based on a Xamarin.Forms control. Like, that's probably the use case. Like, you're using a vendor component library. Sure. Well, they may have updated it, but you're like, I'm not ready to update all that. That's a bulk of my application. So you can go in and add a NuGet that will add a shim backwards compatibility layer for you. And it'll be able to bring in the core of Xamarin.Forms. Now, that'll have implications for your app, possibly, right? Like any backwards compatibility layer, you want to migrate to get the best performance and best optimizations from the start. But hey, if you're looking to migrate over time, you'll be able to do that.
And you're giving us a year, right? A year of Xamarin.Forms support. and it's going to work. It's not like all the apps in the store are just going to break, but
correct. Yeah. And that year is important because you're going to get iOS 15 will be this year. That'll be after iOS 16.
Right.
And iOS 17 won't even be until 2023, and Android usually never has really any issues. So it only becomes to that layer where something in the OS is breaking, which is extremely, extremely rare.
But it happens. It happens, and especially with Apple, because they're a little more unpredictable, as you said.
Yeah, it'll happen. But you have over a year to migrate over your applications. Like I said, there's going to be a try convert tool, which you can run by the command line. And I've done a lot of PCL library conversions to .NET Standard library conversions.
Right.
And those are the easier ones. It's usually like delete everything, add 4 lines of code.
Right.
Where the flip would be worse, which is like, hey, you have 4 lines of code in your project settings. Now you need to add 500 lines of code. And you're like, what do I do? Right. So the migration of your project system should be relatively simple.
All right, so getting back to this idea of upgrading and moving over when the time comes, and obviously you've got over a year, as you said, but let's say I've got something in the App Store right now, and it's just chock-a-block full of stuff. I've got some DevExpress in there, and I've got some Telerik, and I've got some community stuff, and some of your controls, and some of the things that other people have written, maybe some controls that I've written. Is there at any level where, it's going to be fragile? I mean, can you imagine like an application, so like certain things that it's using, that it's going to be the most difficult?
Every application is different. So I can't really speak too much to that. My hope, what we're doing is, and the team is doing, is they're taking a lot of the applications and real world applications and working with customers and trying things early.
Yeah.
So they're working with the component vendors and with other community members to ensure that we're here. So actually participating in those early betas and giving feedback early on is super helpful to help the team there. Now I will say this, I think the most important part is to ensure that you've updated to Xamarin.Forms 5, because that is going to be the smoothest transition. And also it's the best. I mean, it has all the controls are out of the feature flag. They're all on by default. I think it's very delightful. All the app theming stuff. So if you've been modernizing your application with Xamarin.Forms, that migration over should be a lot smoother. Now, if you're not, and you're still on 4.0 or 3.0, you got to look at moving those before trying to make this transition. So that is the thing that I would take a look at, because that will make a lot harder if you haven't been moving with the framework itself.
I told Gerald on .NET Rocks the other day that I've been doing Xamarin.Forms ever since it was introduced, right? And it wasn't always easy. And especially because there's so many dependencies, and Android is such a moving target, and SDKs and JDKs and stuff. And there wasn't a lot of wizards that tell you, oh, you need this version of SDK or whatever. And so I just got to say that after all that, today, the out-of-the-box experience of creating a Xamarin.Forms app is so good. Like, I haven't had any of those issues in at least 2 years. And so I'm just very happy about that. And it's also a call to action for those of you who had old pain, to forget it, let it go and let's move forward. It's good stuff right now. And so I don't want people to be afraid to jump into Xamarin.Forms because, oh, well, Maui's coming. No, go get it. Go get Xamarin.Forms and start playing with it now if you haven't in a while.
Yeah, I just shipped my most recent application for indoor bike cycling the last few months. I've been adding new features and purchases. It's not a crazy complex application, but it uses Bluetooth, and it has uses all the new theming stuff, all the stuff in Xamarin.Forms 5. And I wasn't going to wait. Why delay my application a year when I can go out and have people using it today?
Yeah.
And that's what's important. I think you're right. One thing that I've really loved about the PM and engineering team is that data-driven and customer-driven approach of what are those paper cuts, right? And you're talking about it like, so like Jonathan Douglas, like worked really hard, as on the PM of that auto SDK installer for Android. So when you do file new, if the SDKs change, you have an older version of Visual Studio, you upgrade it, now things are different. It just pops up a box and says, hey, just time to install this thing and blah, 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 right? Yep. Pierce and others worked super hard with the Hyper-V team and the Google teams to get Android emulators working on Hyper-V, right? That's huge, you know. Nowadays, you know, we can do a lot of Docker stuff on WSL, which is great, but there's a lot of companies that have Hyper-V on by default. You can't turn it off, and that would stop you from using the Android emulator. But now it just works out of the box. The iOS stuff, my goodness, with Hot Restart, which is the ability to plug your iPhone into your Windows machine with no Mac at all and just deploy a special package and your iOS application with Xamarin.Forms directly onto your device, right? You can do all of your testing. And that is not to mention all of the productivity gains that all of this is coming to .NET MAUI too, right? So like the things that have been built up over the years from day one with .NET MAUI, they're all going to be there. So like Hot Reload for XAML. Just shipped into a version, I like to call it version 2.0. Dimitri may tell me don't use that, but I'm going to say 2.0 because it is so similar to how it would work in the browser, which is as you type and make changes to the DOM, in this case your XAML, it automatically checks for if it's syntactically correct and just updates your page and only that element on the page, which means if you have a form of data and you filled in all of it and you're changing the button at the bottom, all of your data, all of your view model, all of your state is retained on that page. You also have your live visual tree. You have XAML binding failures that show up in Visual Studio and Visual Studio for Mac. And this is all shared infrastructure between WPF, UWP, Xamarin.Forms, Visual Studio for Mac, and Visual Studio on Windows. And I was just talking to the team, Marco and Bravia and Daniel, who, the engineering team who just worked on XAML code generation, which means if you say text equals binding first name, and if that doesn't exist in your view model, it generates the code for you, for your bindings, for your commands, for your item templates. It will bring in namespaces for you. It'll create your binding context and your data type to give you compiled bindings. It does it all for you. And that was just released in 16.9 on Windows. You know, they're working on more features and to bring it over and things like that. So I'm just saying this tooling, that's just general Visual Studio tooling, right? Well, I like to say the world's best IDE because my favorite IDE is just so packed with amazing features. That's not even including all of the refactorings and all of the C# features and all the things that Mads and Kendra and all these amazing people that I'm so honored to work with every single day. It's just amazing. And you're going to get all of that from day one with .NET MAUI. And, you know, you're going to get a lot of brand new hot reloading of source code stuff too. That's one of the big things with .NET 6 is trying to include more hot reload everywhere possible.
Can you disambiguate between hot reloading and hot restarting?
So hot restart, it's a funky name because I don't think we figured out how to name it correctly. But the idea was is we have this thing called Fast Deploy on Android, which is a button that sort of skips a bunch of linker settings and, you know, does diffing and is pretty good at just making debug builds faster. And hot restart, the idea was, hey, I've used hot reload to reload my UI of my application. And hot restart is a technology that says, hey, I've made changes to my application code, like my view model or my code behind, and I'm at the state in my app that I actually need to stop debugging and restart debugging. And what hot restart does is it is like a next generation of fast deploy, and for iOS now in this case, and it'll be shared with Android in the future at some point. But the idea is like, hey, what if we bring this sort of technology to iOS? What does that enable us to do? Well, it enables us to restart or deploy your iOS application extremely fast in seconds compared to doing a full recompile. Now, a side effect of that technology is that when the engineering team was developing this, the side effect was that they can use this technology of kind of bundling your source code app into a pre-compiled app of some magic. I don't understand how the magic works behind the scene, but it's sort of like a shim layer. We'll just use shim a lot in this video. Yeah. But the idea is they kind of are able to put it in there, and they can, send over just your DLL into there to invoke it. And the side effect of that is being able to deploy to an iOS device directly from your Windows machine without having to go through a native compilation step.
And so where is the code actually being compiled for the Mac without a Mac?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it's compiling, your debug. It's only for debug and development purposes.
Okay.
Because you're shipping your source code and compiled source code into like an app bundle. And it's
really just the UI, right?
Your UI and all your business logic and all your NuGets and all that stuff. It's your compile. It's your bytecode at the end of the day. All just your IL. So it knows how to run your app, and it is it's running .NET, so it's able to kind of run it.
So it's nothing you need a Mac for, but if you're going to actually deploy it to an iPhone fully compiled and independently, then you have to use a Mac, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So like this would give you the ability to like say, hey, I don't even have a Mac right now. Let me just start developing, show it to my boss, show it to my friends, and be productive and feel like, hey, I'm able to do this.
Right.
And, when you need to, then deploy to the App Store, Apple's, EULA and CELA is that you have to do the final LLVM toolchain compilation, which only exists on a Mac. So it's not going through that step.
Got it.
To get that nice, crisp code and fast code that goes through a Mac or a CI CD pipeline like App Center or DevOps or GitHub or anything like that.
The benefit is you don't need a Mac just to sit down and start, writing code for your iPhone or your iPad.
Exactly. Yeah. And you feel super productive, and I still haven't ran into any limitations. Maybe if you're, really, really, really far into your development cycle and you're having crazy dependencies on third party libraries that have native libs or something, then you're really deep in it, and then maybe it won't fall over. But for the 80, I like to say 80-20. The thing that I learned at Canon is like, if you can satisfy 80% and work towards the final 20 over time, that's a good place to start.
Sure. I want to talk about Xamarin Essentials a little bit, because this is and were you the genesis of Xamarin Essentials? I know you were writing a lot of these tools before calling them Xamarin Essentials.
Every single person, every single Xamarin developer was the starting point of this library. Every single community person that ever wrote a plugin for Xamarin, that ever contributed to any of our projects, whoever asked for this to be in the box, this was grown from the community and collaborated with the community from the beginning. So what we found is similar to the Xamarin Community Toolkit. What we found with accessing native functionalities, the actual beginning was Xamarin.mobile, which was 10, 12 years old. And it did like 3 things. You could do like contacts and like take a photo and geolocation. And it gave you a pseudo cross-platform. It was early. It was so early in the Xamarin days. And I've always loved this. And I, worked with a lot of community members that wanted to create more cross-platform functionality. This was like the struggle after Xamarin.Forms was, I want to write cross-platform UI and I want to access those cross-platform features. So you could do that today with like an interface, and you could, inject it and all this stuff. That's a lot for everyone to write or copy and paste code around. So through some amazing work of like Claire Novotny and some packaging tools, it made it really easy to write plugins. And a plugin was, hey, like here's a simple interface to access the camera or geolocation or connectivity. And many people had written this code all the time. So we did all these challenges, and the community did all these plugins, and there was hundreds of them. And we then said, well, what if we take, this idea of separate plugins and iterate on this with the community, which is collaborate. And I often went to many community members and said, hey, we're going to be doing this thing. We'd love if you contribute, do this. And people are like, hey, Microsoft wants to, have a community project that I can contribute. I don't have to maintain my own thing, but we're maintaining this together. And we, worked with the engineering team and with Miguel and others to figure out how to like make it really linker safe. So that was the struggle of it, is like, well, it has 60 or 80 APIs in it. What if I'm using one?
Right.
Well, a plugin gives me one API, so I know that it's only using one thing, which is good. But with Xamarin and .NET, and especially with .NET 6, they have this linker, and there's magical ways of making things linker safe, which is if you only use one API, that's the only code that is included in your project.
Right.
So it takes this larger DLL, that would be a lot of APIs, and when you build your final package, it becomes tiny because it removes all of the stuff you don't use.
Yep.
So that was a big undertaking to put it in, to make it standardized and do all this, but it's grown over time. And many, many people contributed their plugins to the project from their learnings over the years, from modernizing it. There's many, many people that continue to put some of their things, but then realize that we can't do everything. So for example, like Alan Ritchie has Shiny, which does like background refreshing and geofencing and crazy Bluetooth. And there's a lot of other projects that do stuff. But we said, let's do the core 80-20, big 80-20. How can we try to do 80% of the things that developers need? Let's start there. And that's what the team did. And it became so essential to every project that it's included in File New.
That is so cool. So can you just maybe give us a little demo and tell us, give us a little Xamarin.Forms loveliness here?
Yeah. So, there's a few things that I'll point out. I have this app sample that is called App Essentials, and I have an entire series of Xamarin Essentials 101 videos, and it's like every single API under the sun. So you can see here, if you're just like, how does this thing work? Right. There's app info, battery, clipboard, connectivity, contact picker, device info, email, file pickers, geolocation, main threads, media things, phone dialers, screenshots, all the things, right? So you can just like come into the application and just launch it. And this will show you how to use everything that you can possibly imagine. And I stole this old sample from David a long time ago, but the concept was somewhere around like if I had a login screen and I went into like airplane mode and like would it tell me different things back and forth and all these different things. But what it turned into is I just want to list a bunch of APIs. So here's every single API. So like connectivity. I'm connected to the internet. Airplane mode. I'm no longer connected to the internet, right? Like, so if you look at that code, the UI is nothing to like look at because it's all about demoing functionality, right? Sure. So literally the connectivity is a label. That's fine. Right. We go to the connectivity page, like the API is register for connectivity changes.
Yep.
Unregister for connectivity changes.
Right.
Update the label, right? And when you join the page, it will automatically call and set this. So the network access is this network access right here. Yeah. It's super duper simple to come in and do that. So like if you want network access, there it is. But you can come in and say, hey, check this out. Xamarin.essentials. And like, look at all of these APIs, just every single API, one namespace, everything is there for you.
So cool.
So connectivity dot. And you have access to your connection profiles, to the connectivity changed, the network access. And just with that one call, you get access to your connectivity. If you're connected, limited connectivity, anything like that right away. And this will be a trend that you'll kind of see if I go through other examples here. So let's say I did screenshot, great community contribution. Yeah. Take a screenshot. I'm actually screenshot inside of a screenshot, inside of a screenshot, inside of a screenshot, inside of a screenshot. Do you know how I take a screenshot? I say, take a screenshot. You know what I mean? Like that's the API. So here, this is very, very simplistic, but I'm literally coming in, seeing if it's supported because some devices don't support capture of your screen. And I say capture async. It returns back to me this screenshot results that I can read the file from disk immediately and get a file back, and then I can email it. Right from here, you could SMS it, you could share it, you could open another application, you could email it for support. You know what I mean? Anything like that.
And also, just to remind everybody that this is all in the Xamarin.Forms level. This isn't at the native level. This is all pushed up into where your code is.
That's correct.
So
yeah.
into
And
your view models or your code behind or whatever you're doing.
anywhere you want to put it. So yeah, that's a great example. Like for this demo, I just put everything right in the code behind. You can put this in your view models. You can put it anywhere, right? I love this. Like, contact. Pick a contact. Give me all the information. Like super simple. I found it really easy just to get app information. Give me the name, the build version, the build information. I have a button in my Cadence, my other app that I have. And I found that it's really hard to, go off and ask people to give me information about their device. So what do? Is I just get all of the device information and I put it in an email, all using it. So here, these are all different APIs: model, manufacturer, name, version string, platform. See if it's Android, see if it's iOS, device idiom. Is it phone? Is it tablet? And I just literally take this code and I shove it in an email like I have here, and boom, send an email. Again, it's so straightforward. It's like so elegant. And check this out. Like if I go into the docs, right? So I go to docs.microsoft.com. I'm going to go down to Xamarin. And here you're going to see a big Xamarin Essentials button. And this is what I love. Every single API, right? Every single one. Here's geolocation. It tells you if you need permissions, what do you need to do on each platform? And it's just like, hey, there's how you use it.
And it just bolsters this idea that Xamarin.Forms is kind of an outdated name for what you guys are doing with Xamarin technology, but it's where the hotness is. I mean, it's because of Xamarin Essentials, it's not just forms, it's not just UI, it's the place where the cross-platform code happens.
Yeah, when you think of .NET MAUI and it's evolving, you're already getting a taste of that when you do file a new project. And I think that is something that's very, delightful. So if I come in, let me switch back over here, and let's just say we do a new project in Visual Studio. So let me go ahead and bring my Visual Studio over here, create a project. And let me just go ahead and create a new mobile app. And let's just go ahead and say app 1. That's a great name for an app. And let's just give it a blank app for fun and just hit create.
Yeah.
You're going to get everything that you need by default in this project template for creating applications with Xamarin.Forms and Xamarin Essentials. So you get everything you need, right? You have all of your packages as they start to inflate. You'll see Xamarin Essentials, Xamarin.Forms. This is where you're going to put all of your code. So again, literally, right away, I can come in Xamarin.Essentials. And I have every API, like you said, from the very beginning. And you're just ready to rock. Yeah. And I just think it's super duper delightful to do that. Watch this. I'm going to come in and let's just say I say, let me just do a new class. I'm going to say my view model. Okay, so we got the my view model. So let's just make it public here, right? Now here, let's just say we delete all of this stuff here. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my X data type to my view model that I had, and then my view model. And this is compiled bindings. So compiled bindings gives me richer IntelliSense. And here it's going to bring in my namespace for me. There it is. So now what I can do is this, right? I can say label text binding, and let's say hello. Okay. Yeah. And now if we notice, there's a light bulb. Look at that.
Wow.
And now this thing is saying create a property. I'm like, oh, cool. What just happened? Well, it actually wrote the set property for me. Let's implement iNotify property changed over here. Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do this. Perfect. And now if you're using MVVM Lite or MVVM helpers, you're going to have some stuff by default, but let's go ahead and implement this thing. And now I have this hello property. Look at that. Beautiful, right? Wow. Now, great. If I come in and I say hello to, I get the same thing. Let's create hello to, and it only creates hello to behind the scenes. Because you've got Let's get crazy with it. Hello 3. No. I'll just say hello 3. And then I say command, and I say binding my command, right? And then I get the same thing, but what we're going to notice is that it's going to create my command right behind the scenes. So now,
when did this feature show
I command everything. 16.9, Visual Studio 2019 16.9. So this is for everything. Xamarin.Forms, UWP, WPF, all that goodness.
Wow.
And you can just run. You run your application. It's like your code between IntelliCode, code generation. It's like your application writes itself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like this beautiful, beautiful thing that I absolutely love.
James, this is fantastic stuff. And I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And just before we go, I want to mention, if you bring up a browser real quick, I want to mention to the people that DevExpress is offering their control set for Xamarin for free. And if you go to devexpress.com/free Xamarin, you can just register for it and download all of their Xamarin.Forms UI controls for free.
Wow.
How cool is that?
That's amazing.
Yep.
Super cool. Yeah, I super appreciate you being here. Yeah, the main takeaway from all of this, like you were talking earlier, is like go off, and go learn Xamarin.Forms, because all of your XAML, all your code is going to apply. There's going to be new awesome stuff for you to also learn. Right. But all of your code is going to come over, and you can be building and shipping apps today, not months from now. And you can then participate, in the beta. And all of your C# logic is going to work not only in your .NET MAUI apps and Xamarin.Forms apps, but in every single .NET application. And it's a fun time to be a .NET developer.
Boy, it sure is. Thanks again, James. Back to you in the studio, Carl. Thanks for watching. Please visit blazertrain.com and the .NETshow.com for more great content.